Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
So this week, we're going to take a look at a pair of situations having a big impact.
The first, a steep decline in the populations of salmon and other fish will have ripple effects from fishers to consumers.
The other, with U.S. tariffs hitting economies both north and south of the border, experts are warning Ontario could soon run out of landfill space.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV, CTV News Channel, and your CTV News app.
Just imagine if tomorrow President Trump, and don't put it past him, President Trump says, we aren't taking any more of Ontario's waste. What do we do? There's 40%.
As if there wasn't enough to worry about. Ontario is the only province that sends a substantial amount of its garbage south of the border. That was Premier Doug Ford announcing he's reopening the York 1 landfill site in case the White House decides to clamp down on garbage shipments. So joining us with more on this is Calvin Lakin. He is the co-investigator of the Waste Wiki project at York University. Welcome to Your Morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Why is one of the largest provinces in this country about to run out of space for landfills?
So I think for many years, we didn't necessarily invest in landfill infrastructure, and I think that's actually a good thing. So one of Ontario's priorities was to focus on diversion initiatives, recycling, et cetera, things that keep waste out of landfills. Unfortunately, we just continue to produce more and more waste, and we have less and less places to put it. So the impending landfill crisis was one in the making for a very long time.
Ontario sends about a third of its garbage south of the border. Most of that goes to Michigan, and Premier Ford says this trade war could threaten those shipments, meaning the border could shut down. The state is also proposing to raise its landfill tipping fees from 36 cents per ton to $5 per ton. So what would happen if Ontario couldn't ship garbage south of the border?
I think it would be catastrophic. And it's a very real risk, as there is a historical precedent of Michigan denying or refusing to accept waste from Ontario. So I think would cause a severe disruption to not only the cost of landfilling, but just the immediate concern of where do we put our waste? We simply do not have the capacity. And right now we're very, very reliant on U.S. sources, which I think is not tenable in the long term.
We mentioned that Ontario is the only province that sends a large portion of its waste to the States, but every other province seems to be able to manage its waste locally. So what are the other provinces doing that this one isn't?
So I think a lot of that comes down to like proximity, well, three things: proximity, logistics, and economics. And so when you look at where waste is generated in Ontario and what states we are in proximity to, it's very, very cheap to actually landfill in U.S. states. And significantly cheaper than trying to landfill that same material in Ontario or attempting to recycle it in Ontario. So I think one of the reasons why you see other provinces not necessarily pursue this as a viable option is that it's simply not economically tenable. However, if it was economically competitive as a form of disposal, I would bet my bottom dollar that a lot of those provinces would be shipping waste there too.
Even if nothing changes with the U.S. and Ontario continues to send its garbage there in the same amount, a recent landfill report shows that the dumping sites here are going to reach capacity by 2034, so less than 10 years. So, even without changes at the border, what does Ontario's plan look like to try and address the shortage?
Well, as an example, so trying to expand the Dresden landfill to add additional capacity, I think you're just adding a little bit of runway, but not addressing the actual systemic root problems. And really the systemic root problems that we produce way too much waste. Mm-hmm. And so instead of emphasizing things like reuse programs or encouraging more effective forms of recycling or alternative forms of technology, such as waste to energy, I think that what the province is doing is kicking the can down the road, but ultimately we'll have to face that crisis and say we need to do something different, and it can't be burying it in the ground.
Calvin, this is one of those follow the money questions, and that is we privatize out things like recycling programs, for example, which are supposed to divert away from landfills. Obviously, those programs aren't as successful, and we know from investigations even done by this network that a lot of that waste that's supposed to be recycled ends up either in a landfill or having to be burned because it's just not cleaned properly or can't be sorted properly. So what needs to be taken apart and restructured in order for us to be able to manage our waste in this province better?
So this is my personal opinion. So I'm actually highly critical of Ontario's approach towards managing what we call recycling, mechanical recycling. So the technology we use to recycle is actually very inefficient for the types of packaging or the types of materials that are being produced today. And so I think instead of relying on, say, the blue box and assuming that we can recycle our way out of this waste problem, we need to be investing in things like chemical recycling, waste to energy, pyrolysis, new technologies that other parts of the world have adopted with great success, because it's been demonstrated over the past 10 years that you can try to recycle as much as you want, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem that the materials just physically cannot be managed given existing infrastructural constraints.
Salmon, trout, and other related fish populations are seeing steep declines across much of the world. Researchers from Concordia University looked at data from more than 1,000 rivers and streams and found that those fish numbers have dropped by nearly 40% since the 80s. So joining us with more this morning is one of the report's lead researchers, James Grant. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great to have you in amongst us and all the fish that are behind me. Listen, 40% is a really large reduction. What's happening?
Well, a lot of things. If I first could give a shout out to Kylisha Foote, the PhD student who did all this work. But, it's watershed effects for stream resident trout. It's the things we do in the landscape, forestry, farming. The good news is we're doing that better today than we did in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s when we used to, farm and cut trees right to the edge of streams, which, added silt, pollution, sunlight, and warmed those waters. So we're doing a better job today, but there are legacy effects, and so all those early declines start there, as well as damming. And then for the kind of the species that most people think about, these Pacific salmon you've on screen right now, they have a triple whammy because they migrate from freshwater to oceans and back, and so we need the terrestrial freshwater habitat to be sound. And then we need the ocean habitat, which is being affected by climate change in independent ways. And then we need the connecting big rivers to be good, which are often dammed or subject to industrial development. So it's a triple whammy for the anadromous British Columbia salmon.
We know that anything in nature does not happen in and of itself. So what are some of the ripple effects of a large population decline?
Well, I think you can see it in British Columbia, for example. The decline in salmon, the 5 species of salmon on the West Coast, affects the industry. You're showing pictures of that commercial fishery. Although some fisheries are doing well, on average, not doing so well. On the East Coast, the Atlantic salmon has been in decline for a long time. We no longer fish them. And even the sport fishing industries primarily catch and release because the numbers are so low. So huge economic costs we're paying. But even more so, I think it's think about indigenous peoples on the West Coast who built their cultures around Pacific salmon, indigenous people across the country who have close relationships to these fish, brook trout, Arctic char, lake trout. And the settler communities who enjoy fishing. It's one of the top hobbies for all Canadians. And it's both, it generates money for our economy and makes us, feel better about the world. These fish are also great indicators of ecosystem health. I think of when I lived in Newfoundland, the streams in downtown St. John's had these vibrant brown trout populations. Yeah. I think they're not so good today, but that was an indicator that those streams in the middle of that city were in good shape.
Men have historically been the breadwinner of a family, but new numbers show in Canadian homes there is a steady increase of women being the primary income source.
But first, a new study finds while there are more family doctors over the last 30 years, 40% of them have moved to other practices.
Anne-Marie spoke with a family physician at St. Michael's Hospital to explain exactly what this means for you.
While the number of family doctors has increased over the last 30 years, nearly 40% of family doctors moved away from family medicine to go into focused practices like emergency rooms, hospitals, and addictions care. So for a closer look at this movement, I'm joined by Dr. Tara Kieran. She's a family physician at St. Michael's Hospital. Hey, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Can you explain that further? Why are family doctors leaving to go into other practices?
Yeah, there are a lot of contributing factors, but I would say two that really stand out are pay and working conditions. So basically, we looked at over almost 30 years of data, and we found that over those 30 years, many doctors, more and more, were starting to practice in hospital-based settings, particularly emergency rooms, but hospitalists in particular, so actually looking after sick patients in hospital. And you can imagine, so one thing that is important to realize is that many doctors get paid more when they work in a hospital setting than they do in a community family practice. So that's one factor. But another piece is like when you go to work at a hospital, the working conditions often are better for doctors. You're basically showing up there. Someone else has, taken care of all the infrastructure, made sure the internet is working, hired all the staff you're working with. If you want to take a vacation, it's not a problem. The hospital will make sure someone is covering the patient's. Contrast that with the family practice, where actually most of the time you're self-employed and you're looking after everything from hiring the staff, paying the rent, to like the printer paper that's there. And if you need to take a break, you need to take a parental leave even, you have to find someone to cover for you. And that can be really challenging these days. So pay and working conditions are two of the big drivers, I think, for why more and more people are working in hospitals.
Listen, we know that the province of Ontario has taken several steps to address the shortage by bringing in more foreign-trained family doctors. They've introduced team-based care. They've invested in new medical school for family doctors. But what else do you see is needed for family doctors to stay in family medicine?
Yeah, I think those are all really important, good steps. But we do need to make family medicine in the community the most attractive option for people who graduate as family doctors. And right now, actually, it's the opposite. Hospitals are becoming more attractive to them. So how can we make family medicine more attractive? I think we need to increase the relative pay for family doctors. We need to decrease the administrative burden, so all the unnecessary paperwork, ensure our information systems are working. But we also need to, provide, I think, settings where people can just show up and work and be a doctor. So, instead of the small business model, there should also be options for, let's say, primary care centers where doctors can just come, be employed maybe, or be on an hourly wage. They come in, they do their work, and someone else is taking care of all of the infrastructure that's needed to run that clinic. They can just focus on the doctoring. And we hear from our new grads that many of them are interested in that kind of model.
Well, and let's go back to that small business model. I know in having this conversation with family doctors, they do talk about the burden of running a small business at the same time as providing frontline care for, a large roster of patients. It is an important reminder that more than 6.5 million Canadians do not have a family doctor. And in Ontario alone, 2.5 million people of that 6.5 do not have access to a regular family doctor or even to primary care. So yesterday, we know Ontario passed Bill 13. That's the Primary Care Act. Can you explain what the legislation is going to mean, how it will change things?
Yeah, so the Act basically recognizes primary care as the foundation of the healthcare system, and then goes on to lay out 6 objectives for what the system should achieve. And those objectives, actually, I'm really proud to say, come from work that our team did over, a couple of years, where we talked to people in Canada across the country and asked what it is that they wanted to see in a better primary care system. And they told us things like they wanted access to their own health records. They wanted to make sure that, care was, like, the way things were set up was accountable to communities, that it was inclusive and free of discrimination. But most importantly, that everyone had access to care that was with a family doctor, a nurse practitioner, and a team, and that care was timely. And actually, the Act lays out those things quite clearly. And so I think this Act is really important because it puts forward a clear vision for where it is we need to go from a health system perspective. And I think the government has also put forward some money to go with the Act, which is important. And so now it's a matter of achieving that vision.
For generations, men have been the primary breadwinners in heterosexual households, a dynamic that has shaped everything from gender roles to the balance of power at home. Today, that landscape is beginning to shift. Over the last 25 years, the percentage of women who earn more than their male partner has grown from 25.9% to more than 30% you see there on the screen. It's not a complete role reversal, but it does point to a slow shift and a redefinition of what leadership can look like in modern relationships. Peak performance performance coach Hina Khan joins me this morning with strategies for navigating this change. Good morning.
Good morning, Kelsey.
I could see you nodding along.
Yes, because I think that stat is just going to grow and grow and grow. We're entering into a new era for sure.
We are. So I think that means we have to have conversations about this. So the stat we just mentioned,
Yes.
roughly about 32.8% of women in Canada are the primary earner in their home. Why do you think that this number has gone up?
Well, women have entered the workforce and then they're getting promoted. They're going into C-suite roles. They're going into executive roles. So there's that piece of it. Many women are also choosing entrepreneurship. They've got some passions and they turn it into a business, and there's that. And then there's also some women, Kelsey, that want to actually create wealth for themselves and their family. It's what they desire, and they've got some opportunities now that maybe they hadn't had before, and they're taking advantage of those opportunities.
I think with that change in the workforce, though,
Yes.
we're not necessarily seeing as fast of a change in the home. And you see this reflected, I
Yes.
think, a lot on social media.
Yes.
Women saying, hey, I now work 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
I make all this money, but I'm still doing so many tasks at home that it feels like the majority of work is still falling to women. So what does this change mean for families?
It means we got to have some conversations.
We gotta talk.
We got to talk, Kelsey, because you're absolutely right. If you're now the primary earner in the relationship, and you're still taking on all of the household responsibilities, or a majority of them, and you are the primary parent, if that is what your family is like, you've got children, then that's a heavy lift. And that's going to lead to burnout, that's going to lead to stress and overwhelm, and honestly, it will unravel the relationship. So you've got to have communication over the division of labor and know that value and contributing comes in many forms, as we have known for years. And it's not only in the paycheck, but there's got to be a conversation about this. It is not sustainable if you're doing it all.
It is not sustainable by any means. And you can say this from your own personal experience because you experienced this shift within your own household.
Yeah, so this shift happens differently for different people. For some, it's slow. Like, I've been married for 30 years now. And so in the beginning of our relationship, for most of it, Paul was the primary earner, and now I am. It was actually a goal of mine to retire him. And I'll just say he was very up for that goal. He was like, that is a goal I can get my energy behind.
Who wouldn't be? I would love that goal for me too. Jay, take note. Jay, take note.
And then for some people, it comes on suddenly, like something happens like during the pandemic where, someone has lost their job and the other person has to step up. But what you start to realize is that we are modeling this for the first time for many of us. Like, we're on the front lines of this generational paradigm. Like, your daughter will see a whole new model of family life and what that's like, that she's going to take into her family, and for my sons as well. So we've had conversation about what that looks like, but it's important to realize that you still want to have that dynamic of the masculine and the feminine energy. Because for me, I've got hundreds of clients, I'm making decisions all day, and that's being in the masculine energy, nothing to do with genders. And so I also want to be able to just come home and just relax. And so Paul is very much the protector and the provider. It just looks different. It's not all about the paycheck for him to be that for me and for the kids.
I was also reading a really interesting study from about 5 years ago from the University of Waterloo that talked about when you're seeing that shift of roles within the home, you can also do it with something as simple as women have traditionally taken care of what's inside of the house, men have taken care of what's outside of the house in terms of household tasks. What if you switch that up? What if mom is the grass cutter? Then my daughter grows up seeing a whole world where she doesn't just have to do laundry and cooking. If I give that task to the boys, that gives them a big shift that's just subtle within their brain, but it changes their whole kind of trajectory of what they'll think is their responsibility as they get older.
What you're saying is so important because it's more than words. You're seeing it being embodied and acted out in the home.
This is Your Morning, the podcast, where we bring you some of the best conversations from our show every week. We'd love for you to start your morning with us live, so you can tune in weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app.
Okay, who's thinking about summer travel?
We have two interviews here on the changing nature of vacation and tourism in 2025. Everyone's favorite travel expert, Lauren Christie, is back with a new strategy for summer trips.
But first, what impact is Trump's presidency having on the Canadian tourism industry?
We know there's less Canadians traveling to the U.S., but there has also been a drop in American tourists coming to Canada that is fueled in part by tariffs. In April of this year, U.S. residents traveling to Canada by plane dropped by 5.5%. Land border crossings also down more than 10%. So a closer look at what this means for our tourism here in Canada. We've brought in Wayne Smith. He's the director of an Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research at Toronto Metropolitan University. Good to have you here.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what kind of changes are we seeing, first of all, in Canadian tourism?
A couple of things that we're seeing right now is we're seeing a little bit of a drop in the U.S. market, mostly because two reasons. One, the U.S. economy is a little bit dicey at the moment, so people are nervous about traveling and spending a lot of money that they wouldn't normally spend. The second thing that we're seeing is there are some, because of the instability of what's going on entirely, tariffs included, people get nervous if there's instability in the marketplace. Tourism is very much a safety industry, so people need to feel safe both coming and going.
Yeah, because there's some border issues, which is a White House issue, and then there's the cost issue, which comes from tariffs. What are some of the factors that are affecting levels of Canadian tourism here at home?
A couple of things that are affecting, once again, because of the economy being a little bit dicey and people being unsure about jobs, that is changing. We're also seeing increased prices for hotels. So could you imagine, the hotel, well, you're not paying direct tariff in a hotel, the hotel is paying all kinds of tariffs in terms of all their supplies and everything like that. So that's rising prices. So that's causing hotel prices to rise. Airlines are, especially if you're flying to the States right now, it's getting a lot more expensive because there's a lot less flights.
Yes, I know that firsthand. Listen, you've said the issue, though, isn't just about tariffs. You talk about this feeling of safety, and I've never thought of that before, but you're right. People need to feel safe if they're going to go and travel. But there is this level that's been created, so why is that?
Well, it's an uncertainty principle, because when people feel uncertain, they get nervous, they get uneasy. So what we tend to see is trip types change. You tend to go somewhere closer, you tend to take a shorter trip. So we're starting to see some of those trends already where people are only taking a 4-day weekend instead of taking a 2-week trip.
And then the ripple effect of that, of course, is on hotels, restaurants, and who directly would lose because you're not staying there for the same amount of time.
Exactly. And you're also starting to see, because people can work from home, people traveling Monday through Thursday to try and get some cheaper prices. So we're starting to see some different trends as well in the travel industry as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. Is it possible that this could be a positive for Canadian tourism? Like, where would we find the silver lining?
Well, right now, the Conference Board of Canada is projecting about a $9 billion increase in domestic tourism. We're also seeing increased tourism from Europe and Asia at the moment. So
because they're not going to the U.S.
Yes. And so we're starting to see some of that residual coming close. And it'll be interesting to see as the economy goes over the summer, how that ends up being.
What are you watching for, Wayne, as somebody who studies this industry and this level of uncertainty and up and down that we're in right now?
Well, I'm watching for a couple different things. I'm watching for consumer confidence and how good they're feeling about traveling. So if people are feeling good about jobs, if they're feeling good about opportunities, travel's going to rise. Travel is one of the best indicators of the economy. It's the first thing people cut when your budget's going down, and it's the first thing to come back when the economy's starting to rise again because people want to do it. So when we take a look at how tourism goes, usually tourism's a barometer of what's going to happen next in the economy.
Yeah. Oh, Wayne, this was a fascinating conversation, and something as we head into summer, which is typically a busy season for tourism, what's going to happen?
Have you ever heard of the sneaky trip travel trend? I love this. This is a concept also known as a hush vacation or an impulse getaway. It really is gaining momentum thanks to an increase in travel following the pandemic. It's also, I'm going to say, a push for privacy, ditching social media, staying truly in the moment without posting for other people to see. Let's figure out how this works. We've got travel journalist Lauren Christie with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I love this concept. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. For those that are unfamiliar, what is a sneaky trip? What boxes do you have to check?
There's a few little boxes. Well, first of all, it should be a shorter trip, so usually 3 to 4 days. Don't share any details in advance. The big key one is don't post on social media. And I will put a little caveat to that. I think earlier you actually even showed a TikTok viral influencer, Daniel Bennett, and he was talking about how important the Euro sneaky trip is with a certain age group. And one of the things that he said is you can post on social media, but not until you get home. It has to be when you get home. And his recommendation was to have an adult beverage in your hand and just do 1 or 2 photos.
Totally.
And no itinerary, because you just don't want to be overplanned.
And especially when it's 3 or 4 days. I mean,
Correct.
Day 1 is travel too, and then day 4 is travel as well.
Exactly.
So why do you think this is a growing trend? Because if you think about it, like pre-social media, every trip was a sneaky trip?
Yeah,
So
and now I just think the difference is that people are getting tired of the expectation of I have to do this and I should be seen to be doing this and share it with my followers. Like, it's so much nicer for people to just go away and live in the moment, be with the people that you're with, and not worry about who is at home liking what you're doing. Like, it's a little bit, it's relieving when you're trying to go on a trip like
freeing,
that.
isn't
Freeing,
it?
that's the word.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I know that you just got back from Europe. I saw some of it on Instagram, but you did have a sneaky component.
I did.
That you did not post.
Correct.
But we are going to talk about it right now, right?
Right. So this is my post. So I ended up in a weekend in Paris. I got to tell you, it was hard for me because I'm one of those posters that posts while I'm there. But Paris was a great place to do it. You can walk places without having to plan a bunch of stuff. I mean, sure, you can go and plan the heck out of that trip, but you can also plan nothing and go, which is easy. And what I also love, just as a tip for Canadians, is that with the rerouting of flights from a lot to the US to Europe now, WestJet, for example, you can get to Paris direct from Calgary, from Halifax, from St. John's, Barcelona, where I know you went for a sneaky trip, Calgary, Halifax. So there's a lot more options for a quick Euro sneaky trip.
Oh, I love that. Okay, speaking of options, if somebody does want to take a sneaky trip, where do you recommend they go?
I think a good place if you don't want to do a Euro one is maybe Bermuda. I love Bermuda. There are direct flights on Air Canada and Bermuda Air from Montreal, Toronto, Halifax, and it's such a small, easy country to get around.
How pretty it is, too.
And it's pretty, and there's so many free, easy things to do. The beaches mostly are public access and gorgeous and free. There's a railway traverse you can do across the island free, no reservations required. St. George's, the town, or St. George, the town, sorry, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Free, you can walk around, it's beautiful. So there's so many things that don't require pre-planning and things that you can just show up and do. And one thing, my favorite one is on Friday nights, they have what's called the Uber Vita boat cruise, leaving from Hamilton. It's a complimentary boat cruise, no reservations, you just line up and go, costs nothing. You go on this beautiful tour of Hamilton Harbor. And they just make their money from the bar drinks. So you just, the cocktail, the bar is a cash bar and you just do it.
So smart.
And if you can't get on, you just wait for the next one because there is no reservations. You just line up and go. So
How
it's easy.
fantastic. Okay, so that's easy for people who are on the eastern part of this country, or living in the eastern part. But for those in the western section of this country, what do you recommend?
I would go Dawson City, and I know that's a little bit of a hike, but it is a pretty cool, sneaky thing to say that you went up and then come back and say that you were there. MasterCard Economic Institute just released a travel report that said it's one of the fastest growing destinations in Canada, and largely that's fueled from people from BC. So people on the West Coast are going up. It's part of Parks Canada National Historic Site. Beautiful. There's so many things to do. I would recommend that, remember about the adult beverage in your picture when you get home? Right. The sour toe cocktail at the Sourdough Saloon. And I think you've probably heard about this, but it's that shot of Yukon Jack with the mummified toe.
Yes.
And as they say, you can drink it fast, you can drink it slow, but your lips must touch the toe.
Oh, that's so funny. Ah, fantastic. And look at this. I mean, here is some inspiration. All right, any final sneaky trip tips?
I do have one, and I'm going to go against the purists. You know, Daniel Bennett, who you showed earlier, the TikTok guy, was saying that you don't tell anybody that you're doing it. That makes me a little nervous. I always say, if you're going to go away on a trip, especially if you're overseas, you got to tell at least one person. Speaking from a guy who went overseas without telling his parents when I was a teenager, I did tell my brother that I was going to South America for a week, just in case something happened. So I would recommend doing that.
Tell your mom, because she will find you.
Or that.
A lot has changed since January 20th, 2025, as a flurry of public statements and executive orders from the Trump administration reshapes the face of American politics.
U.S. President Donald Trump's rapidly changing policies could lead to more transgender people seeking asylum here in Canada.
So we spoke to Hannah Krieger on why she fled to Canada.
An American transgender woman is seeking asylum in Canada for fear of persecution under the Trump administration. Hannah Krieger is one of many transgender Americans who have turned to Canada for refuge since the Trump administration passed a series of laws targeting transgender and non-binary people. The latest numbers from Rainbow Railroad, a nonprofit group, shows that more than 3,000 requests have come from Americans this year, marking more than 1,000% increase. That's compared to just last year. So we're joined this morning by Hannah Krieger and Yamina Ansari, immigration lawyer. Good morning to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Hannah, I'll start with you. When we look back at what brought you to this country, I'm guessing it started during Trump's inaugural speech earlier this year, where he made a point of narrowing in on the trans community. I want to play that as a reminder for our viewers, and then you and I will discuss out of it.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
When you heard that and the cheering that went along with it, what went through your mind and how did it play into your decision to eventually come to Canada and claim asylum?
Well, it was definitely like a precedent setting just for like where they were going to go with their future policies in mind. So it started, it's like a very slow effect, snowball over time. Like it started, just with the legal change, and then over time they're going to introduce more and more harmful stuff. I just saw it coming, and I was keeping a close eye on everything. Keeping a close eye on everything, and then as things got worse, I made the choice. I saw a window that was closing. I figured just because there were passports with X markers being confiscated and not returned, which mine does have. So I saw that and heard those stories pop up, and I was like, okay, I might not be able to get my documents updated correctly, so I'm just going to use what I have and just get out as soon as possible. And then we had a window that I thought was going to be closing soon, so I went for it. I didn't really feel any other choice in that moment.
It's a huge decision to make, to leave behind friends and family and community and settle in a new place and then claim asylum. I want to remind everybody, you're talking about what's been happening in the last 6 months. Here are just some of the executive orders that have been put in place by the Trump administration that specifically target the trans community. The Trump administration has passed executive orders that only recognize two genders, male and female. They placed a ban on DEI federal programming, a ban on transgender military members from serving, and a ban on trans men from women's sports. So if you can for us, can you describe what it's been like for you living in the United States in these last 6 months?
A lot of tension just in day-to-day life. My scope kind of went from exploring and like having a lot of just like fun, going down and doing stuff that I'm 22 years old, stupid stuff that you do when you're 22 years old, 21, that before he got sworn in. And then now it's like, okay, I know my work is safe, I can go there. I know my home is safe, I can go there. I have a friend's house who's safe, I know that. And then it would just be like a cycle of like, okay, what do I know is safe to do right now that would not be like a risk or a confrontation? Obviously, confrontation is always a thing, no matter what. Even before Trump got sworn in, that was always a risk. But it's basically being enabled by this administration. I don't trust them to back up anybody who's being harmed by these policies right now, or protect them. They're instigating it as well, so it's scary.
Yeah. Yamina, I want to bring you in on this conversation. You have represented other members of the community before from several countries. But since this case is an American seeking asylum in Canada, what factors work into a successful case of asylum here?
Something that I'm really, really glad about is that the media is reporting heavily on her case, because in Canada, we do have this impression of America being a safe country. And I think this is a concern that I have, is when Hannah discusses her case, that the member evaluating her case is not going to be open to the idea that America is no longer safe to the trans community. So I'm hoping that by the time her case is heard, that narrative and mindset really shifts in the general Canadian public, and also within the folks who will be hearing her case, realizing that now that Trump has been elected in his second term, the situation in America has really shifted from what it was before and historically.
And the bar is a fear of persecution for your personal safety or even death in past cases. We know that. Hannah, you're here on an asylum claim. We know that you're unable to work. You have a GoFundMe page to help raise some money for your case. Since this could take up to 2 years, what will you do if your claim is not approved?
Well, it depends on if it's safe to go home or not. If I get denied because it genuinely is safe to return, I would love that. First of all, as much as I want this case to go well for me and I want to stay here because I like it here, and obviously I don't feel safe at home right now, but if the tide does turn and it is safe to return in 2 years, I think it'd be a net positive, because that means that people at home aren't in danger, and that's all I want. If it feels like it's just like because of agreements between countries kind of thing, and it doesn't feel like it's actually safe to, doesn't actually feel safe to return, I'll appeal the decision. But I'm not going to, if it's still finalized, I'll either find an alternative or I'll return if absolutely have to. But I'm playing this by ear. I'm gonna cross that bridge when I burn it.
Hannah,
Yeah, I'm just going as I go and trying to make sure I'm treading as carefully as possible with this.
Yeah, I know it's a really difficult time, and I appreciate you coming on to share your story with us. Can you describe for us, Hannah, what it's been like for you since landing in Canada? How have you felt since you've been here?
I've been able to actually process information clearly. It's been nice being able to do that. I can actually just think about what's going on and not really just wake up dreading what the headline is going to be that's going to maybe affect me or make it life impossible or worse, which is huge. I am really nervous about just the safety of all of trans people in the States going forward. The bills have been nonstop. It's been overwhelming. So it's been able to just keep an eye on it without really the stress of being directly hit by it, and just being able to just look at everything and make sure, from a level perspective, it's been, it's still really sad, but it helps me look at it clearly and kind of give me a path to push for, which has been nice. But again, that doesn't take away from the problems. It just makes me able to not stress about being able to wake up, which is a huge upgrade, I would say.
It's a lot to carry. Hannah Krieger, I want to thank you for coming on this morning, and Yasmina Ansari, immigration lawyer. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you for having us.
That's it for the podcast today. Make sure to download and hit subscribe on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you listen in. We've got new podcasts, episodes every week.
And of course, we'd love for you to join us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel or on the CTV News app. We'll see you in the morning.